almost there. No way. What is this? You're tuned in to the Eyes Open podcast, where secrets aren't safe and we see it all.
Now, maybe I shouldn't have waited till, hundreds of episodes in to even get into this particular topic. One, because the mafia that people know of, that they see on TV, it has a lot to do with secret societies in general, because it's what it was birthed out of. So if you're talking conspiracies at some point with secret societies and brotherhoods, you're going to get into talking about the mafia. If even, about the mafia in a slight sense at all. But for me, it hits a little closer to home as well for multiple different reasons. Now, I have talked about it before. I believe, there was an episode we talked something about it, because it had to do with, it was something about the Masonic episode I did. It was about Freemasonry. But pretty much, the short story in this sense is the mafia was founded by a guy that was a Freemason. If you look into the codes of the mafia, like omerta, or when you're being put into the family as any family as a made guy, you go through a ceremony that it derives from these type of secret societies. And for the longest time, the mafia was you had J. Edgar Hoover go on TV and say, the mafia is a myth. They do not exist. It's not real. So you had even the president of the United States saying that it wasn't real. Until Joe the Rat Valachi, that was his name if you look him up, he was a guy that came out and said it's true. The mafia is real. I'm a member of it. And it was like a Senate type of committee hearing, and he came out, broke down the whole structure from copper jeans to bosses to underbosses. He broke the whole thing down for everybody to see that the mafia was real. So that's why he went down as, the rat of all rats, because he was the first one to expose it to the public, because it never was supposed to be. The mafia, when it came over from Italy or Sicily, it was originally set up as, if you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, I'm sure a lot of people have. If people are, into learning about the mafia at all, they've seen, Goodfellas. And honestly, for the people, this is another reason why I'm going to go into talking about this topic. There's multiple reasons that tie into what I talk about a lot. One of them is, it hits close to home for me, because me being Italian American, me being on two sides of the fence, with family going back that were in that life to the family that's not, and seeing how hard Italian Americans, it was for them when they came to this country, and for this to kind of define us as people. Because when you think about it, it's one of the biggest things people stereotype Italians with. They're like, oh yeah, they're all mafia type people and stuff like that. And it's a stereotype. I mean, all different nationalities and stuff are going to have their stereotypes, but I feel like for the people that really don't understand how the mafia works, how Italians really are, it's good to do a show like this so people can understand. Because like I said, now this was way back. We're talking, probably the 40s and 50s or something like that. So I didn't have, it all depends on how you look at it. Now, I'll explain to you like this. The way it works with the mafia in general is it's kind of one of those, you don't talk about it things, even if you're a civilian that has family members or close people that have family that are in it, you just keep your mouth shut in general. That's kind of how I was growing up. I ran into a lot of people that my dad introduced me to, that he ended up running into, that were absolutely in that lifestyle. And it's just something, you kept your mouth shut. It wasn't something you talked about. And I remember, because I remember there was a funny story. There was a guy that was dating my sister, and he was a real piece of garbage. So I went over and got into it with the guy, ended up smacking him around, and his uncle jumped out, was gonna, like, he was a big guy. His uncle came out and was gonna do something. So I was a young kid, man. I was maybe 17, and I told his uncle, I said, look, I don't want no problems with you or anything. And that's when my dad got out of the car, and his uncle's like, look, we don't want no issues. Just, and if you had seen my dad, man, back in the day, he was a big guy, big gorilla freaking guy. And so long story short, we ended up getting into an interaction with the police after that. The police got called. And it was funny because the cops came up to my dad and me, and he was like, oh, he doesn't want to press charges because he said you're connected with the mafia. And my dad starts laughing, and he's like, man, that kid's been reading too many funny books. He's like, mafia. And it was funny because, like I had said, I'll get into the stuff about my dad here in a minute, but that's how it was. Whether you were, the people that are actually in it, they wouldn't throw that, even though, like I said, my dad wasn't in it, but I'm saying, like, even if you knew these types of people, you never admitted to the existence of anything. It was just how you carried yourself. You just didn't, because my dad even told me the people that he knows that was in that life, he didn't even want to go and sit down and hear what they were even talking about, because he says, how do I know one day something might happen and they think, oh, hey, your guy over here heard something, he's not one of us. So he's like, oh, those guys will take me out in a heartbeat. I'm nothing to them. So, and for clarification, you guys will understand more. My dad was in construction for a long time. He actually grew up with a lot of very prominent mob figures from, multiple different, you could say, from the Irish to the Italians. He grew up with some pretty prominent figures. And this is going back to, I guess this will probably be a good place to start. So originally, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. And for the people that don't know, see, this is the stuff they don't tell you in the movies and stuff like that. And actually, they didn't even put it in this movie that I'm about to tell you guys about. So and you understand, the Mafia is nothing like what they tell you guys it's like on TV. For one, it's way less glamorous. Okay, these people had Cadillacs and nice stuff, and they dressed up and went out. But the way the movies almost depict it is as if they're, to me, from the guys I've seen in real life, because like I said, I have friends that absolutely were in that lifestyle, that their families were. And when you look back at the old way the Mafia was from when they were hot and heavy, like, what would it be, the 70s? Because Cleveland, what people don't know, there's some big backstory into, and if you go to, it was funny when we went to the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, it shows a lot about Cleveland, and even my wife, she's like, wow, you were right, man. Cleveland was really, connected with all the families and all that. And I was like, yeah, I was like, they don't tell you this, but Cleveland, Ohio was very active back in the day. There were so many car bombs going off in Cleveland, Ohio, that it was called Bomb City, USA back in the 70s. So back to what I was saying about in the movie Casino, okay, they don't show it. They showed that they were bringing the suitcases back to Kansas City, and that's where they were doing, splitting it all up and everything between all the bosses of the Midwest. But this is what they don't tell you. The casinos were in Vegas in that time were being run through Cleveland. Okay, all the money was going through Cleveland. The bosses in Cleveland were running those casinos. You can go look all this up. So Cleveland had a big part in a lot of that type of stuff nationwide back in the day, and it's not put out there a lot. But Cleveland was the type of place, you know, I mean, and I moved out of Ohio in general when I was young. So, and it's, you know, it's changed a lot. And here's a big thing I want people to know is everything's changed a lot. I mean, in the 90s, even the Mafia was still very active. And that's not to say it's not. It's, you know, they're in a lot of, I'll give you a prime example. When the Gambino boss got out, this was, you know, some years back. This wasn't long ago, though. Maybe, what was it, like 3 or 4 years ago? He was executed right on his doorstep as soon as he got out. If that don't tell you that they're still active, and notice nothing came of that. I think they said they arrested somebody in connection with it, but you already know that was a hit that was called out, absolutely. Because they knew the people that were the boss that came out for the Gambinos, they were thinking he was going to come back to take over. So they made sure that wasn't going to happen. But like I'd said, it's a type of thing people don't talk about. They don't say anything. Even more so because, like I said, my family was in it ages back. And we lived a life, like, to be completely honest with you, we lived a life where my dad knew these guys. He grew up with these kind of guys. We had them in our family going, like I said, way back. But my dad raised me to know that type of lifestyle was not, you know, not only was it not of a man of God would be near anything like that, but he used to tell me about how he had offers to do all types of stuff and to work with these kinds of people, even in his field in construction, and he turned it down. Because obviously, you know, with construction, unions, all that type of stuff, they've been running, the Mafia has been running stuff in the unions for a very long time. And what made me think about this was because, like I said, it's not just a secret society part of it, and they'll deny it. See, real people that have been in the life, that didn't rat, that didn't testify against people, you can ask them all day, and a lot of them will tell you to this day, they'll say, you know, it doesn't exist. What are you talking about? There's no Mafia. And that's what, you know, I don't blame a lot of those people for doing that, because of course they're not going to, and like I said, it goes back to the code of what those people are in. And it lends to, like I said, these other secret societies that are out there. They're going to lie to you. If they're a member, they can't tell you that they're a member. And that's why anybody that's seen, like The Sopranos, which, by the way, I love The Sopranos. Gandolfini's great. It's a really good show. I enjoy it. But it is, obviously, a lot of people should know, it's so far-fetched and nowhere near how the Mafia operates in a lot of ways. I mean, it's kind of like a satire comedy compared to how the Mafia actually carry themselves. Because when you're around that type of world, it's very dark. It didn't, I mean, and The Sopranos did have a darkness to it in a sense, like it almost came off as a dark, dramatic comedy, but it's a lot different when you see it in real life. That's why I was saying, for the people that don't know, it's a lot different than what they put on TV. It really is. And it's not something that defines us Italians, and it shouldn't, because there's a lot of us that, you know, came here. For the people that don't understand how it was for Italians, when Italians came to America, okay, it's one of the reasons why they started the Italian American Civil Rights League, because we were later on being all called, you know, a bunch of mobsters and stuff like that we weren't good, upstanding citizens. But when Italians came here, they, just like you had the black and white bathrooms, they treated Italians just as bad. They didn't want nothing to do with Italians. Italians did jobs that, nobody wanted to do, nobody wanted to touch. And then later on, we were in construction and we're building all these buildings that were going up across the nation. So we fought very hard to get to where we were at. Like, if you guys have seen the movie The Bronx Tale, the Bronx was a beautiful neighborhood back in the day. The neighborhood, Little Italy, where my mom grew up but in Cleveland, Little Italy, not New York. But you have, the Bronx up there was a beautiful neighborhood back in the 50s and stuff. And my mom, because you guys have to remember, I'm 40. My parents are they're in their 80s. My dad passed, but he passed at 83 recently. So that's what you have to understand. It's different when you think about it. They had me when they were in their 40s. So I have an old soul in that sense, because growing up, I listened to 50s music. I used to hear about the 50s a lot. It was unusual for somebody at my age. I honestly didn't have any friends that had older parents like me. Everybody thought my dad was my grandfather growing up. So this type of stuff, like I said, I heard about them growing up in the 50s, about Little Italy in Cleveland, and my mom used to tell me how she grew up on Murray Hill. She said, man, it reminds me a lot of the Bronx Tale. She said that's how our neighborhoods were back in the day. We had you had the fruit stand guy come by, the waffle guy. She said we had all these guys that would come through the neighborhood with different stuff. It was a lot of fun listening to how simpler it was back in those days. But now, I mean, look, you go to the Bronx now, so it's a Wild West or over in the Bronx. You don't really want to be over there if you don't have business being over there. But nonetheless, like I said, it's one of these things that people need to understand. It doesn't define Italian Americans, even though people think it's a funny stereotype. There's a lot of people that lost their lives behind that lifestyle. And now when I see it's become like trying to think of the word. It's become kind of trendy. That's the best way to put it. To see all these people that are doing these Mafia podcasts now. I mean, it's crazy. You're seeing Mafia podcasts all over the place. And a lot of these people that are doing the Mafia podcast, they're all feuding with each other. The funniest thing is they're calling each other rats when most of them are rats. That's a big thing, is honestly, like, if you're saying you were in the Mafia and you're doing a podcast about it, you violated everything about, the oath you took in the Mafia was to keep your mouth shut. And even if that's, it's an evil organization, it is. I mean, they kill people. I don't care even if they kill each other, they're still killing people. So it's an evil organization. A lot of these ex-guys say they found God and stuff like that. And I think that's great. If you found Christ and you changed your life, that's great. But it doesn't, help Italian Americans that you don't leave that in the past, that you guys keep doing podcasts about it like this is something to glorify. And I see these guys walking around talking about all this type of stuff, and they know that was one of Omerta was one of the main codes, was you don't ever talk about it. And that's why I was saying, like in The Sopranos, the one thing that did give you a good scoop of how it works is when Johnny Sack got indicted, Gandolfini said, or Tony Soprano, he said, hey, he admitted in court. They said, you're a member of the Mafia. And he said, yes, I am. That right there, as far as the Mafia is concerned, just admitting that that thing, or they'd say this thing of ours, just admitting this thing of ours, that's what, Cosa Nostra stands for. But admitting that it exists, you already violated your oath right there. So that's what they consider you a rat. If you even admit that it exists, that's it right there. Boom, you're a rat. You broke the code. That, especially if you're a made guy. But like I said, of course it's part of our history and stuff like that. And like I'd said, I'm glad it was exposed because, like I told you, in a sense, this is something they said that didn't exist. It does not exist. Okay, it's a fairy tale. It's not real. But then people ended up finding out about it. But then it became like an Italian Disneyland. Everybody wants to go to these neighborhoods. They want to go watch these podcasts about it and glorify it. And that was a big thing. See, my dad, he used to tell me, he says, man, I'll watch these mafia movies here and there and stuff like that. He said, it's not something to glorify. He said, these people are murderers. And he's like, the people that are in this life, that are around this life that I know. And he said, I don't talk to none of them. I don't glorify none of that. And see, that was an unfair stereotype growing up. Like I said, my sister's boyfriend, he's, in the mafia or connected to the mafia. And my dad just laughs. And that wasn't the only time that we were unfairly stereotyped like that. And was said that. And my dad's like, come on now. And me just thinking, I remember being a little kid and watching the mafia movies and stuff like that. And seeing my dad, I remember at times I used to think, because it was funny, I remember watching The Sopranos and how Meadow, when she first started to find out who her dad was, that Tony Soprano was this mafia guy. For me, it was funny. I remember growing up, and when people would joke around and say this stuff, I used to think, I was like, you know what? I really don't, my dad's at work a lot. He's a, contractor. He's in construction. And I was like, what if I remember being a little kid, this was funny, and thinking this, I laugh now that I think about it. I was like, what if he is in the mafia and I just don't know about it? And so I remember thinking stuff like that. But as I got older, I realized that's why when people would say it, I would laugh. I'm like, dude, because I worked for my dad, at a very young age. And, like I said, he was just a contractor. He wasn't into that lifestyle. He talked against it, if anything. But people need to realize that I think it gets unfairly put out there to be made out to be like it's a joke. A lot of people lost their lives behind that lifestyle and being putting their whole family, in a sense, dedicating it to that lifestyle. Because my grandfather, his father, both, not even born here, born in Italy, they worked hard to not have to get into that lifestyle. My grandfather's brothers, so it would be my great uncles, they did very well for themselves. They started a trucking company, and my family, like I said, I had family that was on my mom's side that they were far back. They owned a car dealership, and they were, connected in the mafia and were around that lifestyle. But I don't know too much about it, so I can't really speak on it. I know minuscule stuff. I looked into them and I found out, and I was like, oh wow. So, there is mafia ties in my family. But like I said, it goes way back. It's not something I'm proud of. It's not something I glorify or would tell anybody that is of that lifestyle to glorify it. That's just the thing. You see all these people that say they're in the mafia. If they were in the mafia, they could simply let people know, hey, this is what it was like. It's not a good thing to be involved in, and leave it at that. Use that to kind of be the jump off of showing people the other great things of Italian Americans. I mean, look at all the culture we've brought to this country, from your coffees and cappuccinos to pizza and our cuisine to you name it. So there's great things that can be said about Italian Americans, but they'll still glorify this type of thing because, mind you, it's hot and heavy in Italy. Okay, in Italy, the mafia is alive like crazy. I mean, you got the 'Ndrangheta, which is the Calabrian mafia in out of Calabria in Italy. You still have Cosa Nostra. You have Camorra. There's the mafia is still very active. I mean, in Italy, they'll take out judges and politicians over there. They don't care at all. It's very much still alive in Italy to this day. But in America, it still is. It's just they've went into legitimate businesses. They don't, whack each other like they used to anymore in the streets. That's what brought a lot of heat. That's what brought a lot of the families down. And in places like, New Jersey and Philly, the mafia is still very active. And that's verified. But it's just not, the FBI, in a sense, has stopped investigating them too, because obviously right before 9/11 and post 9/11, there's been a lot more stuff the FBI has obviously wanted to investigate. And with the whole Gotti situation and all that, and the people that ended up testifying after that, it kind of all snowballed from there. So the New York family started getting broken up a lot, and the mafia that people know from the movies and all that became a thing of the past. But like I'd said, it's not something that defines Italian Americans, and I wanted to, make an episode to talk about this, because it doesn't, it shouldn't, and shame on all the people. Like, if you're out there and you're claiming to be a Christian, which a lot of them are, and some of them, and like I said, I'm not going to name drop, I'm not going to mention names. If you're out here saying you're following Christ, but you're glorifying that lifestyle, and you're still talking to people about it, and you're talking about these old murders, and you're living in that old way, it's not helping glorify Christ at all. It's not. And you should think about that and change it. You should change that. I don't think it doesn't do good for the Italian community. There's a lot of good things that we've done in this country, and we're continuing to do. A lot of us are in business, have been in business, like myself. I worked hard to not, even if it's, I'm not somebody that could go around and join the mafia back when I was younger and I was in business. It wasn't something that was around like that. But even if it was, I wouldn't. We worked hard to be able to say, hey, we run our own show, we run our own businesses, we don't have affiliation with the mafia and all that. And another thing, what they don't tell you is, they're like, the mafia ran neighborhoods with an iron fist. It was safe to live in these neighborhoods. A woman could walk the streets in Little Italy at 3:00 in the morning, not have nothing to worry about. There was good parts of it, but here's the thing is, the mafia extorted a lot of very good business people that didn't, they had no choice. They said, hey, we run these neighborhoods. If you want to operate here, you're going to pay tribute. Well, I wouldn't say tribute. People that ran with the mafia paid what they call tribute. And that's what I was going back to with Goodfellas. The mafia really just started for people that essentially couldn't go to the police. And that's what it was. And Goodfellas is very close to how the mafia actually was. Very close. But like I said, if you look into these people, the Henry Hills and the, who De Niro played, even though he was like half Irish in the movie or whatever, but these mobster guys were not what you guys think they were. They were not these really sharp dressing type guys. They were like that, but a lot of them, if you seen how they really carried themselves back in them days, they, that's why they were called hoodlums and stuff. They weren't very classy guys. A lot of them were some pretty low down people, to be completely honest with you. So the movies kind of buttons it up and makes it more glamorous than it really is. But a lot of these people were just low down people. But yeah, that's how it started. Even when it came over from Italy, it was essentially a police department for wise guys, like they said, or people that couldn't go to the police, people that didn't want to go to the police. If something happened to, like you'd seen The Godfather, for the people that have seen it, in the beginning, where the guy went to him and asked him to kill that guy on his daughter's wedding. He says, "You come here, you asked me to do murder on my day of my daughter's wedding." And, you know, that's what it was. For the people, that guy wasn't a wise guy, but he was connected to these mafia guys, like he knew them. And he said, look, you know, these were the people that wanted street justice. They didn't want to go to the cops. They didn't want to go that route. They wanted this person taken care of. So that's essentially how the mafia started as well, it was for people that wanted to go that route and not deal with the police. But I mean, that's really why I wanted to talk about this, was not just because of the effect it had on my life growing up, but the fact that I keep seeing these podcasts and I just don't think, you know, it's good for what you guys are doing. It's not. You guys can talk about a lot of other things than have to keep glorifying the mafia. It's not something to glorify. There's a lot of people that lost family members over it. And to say they only killed their own, oh, trust me, if you had anything to do with their money or affiliations of any sort or whatever, oh, they would absolutely take you out. Okay, they've taken people out that weren't just made guys and stuff like that. They absolutely have. So that's another thing that, you know, is not 100% true. But I just don't believe, you know, if this ends up getting out there and one of these types of people that do these type of podcasts see that, honestly, that's what you guys should do. If you're Italian Americans that want to build up the Italian American community, you shouldn't be glorifying this stuff. It's been 50 freaking years, okay, since they were really rolling and stuff. If not, you know, longer. It's time to kind of, you know, they don't even make mafia movies no more because it's just not part of our culture anymore. You guys shouldn't be glorifying it. You should be glorifying Christ. And you should be, you know, the way you guys tell these stories only glorifies that lifestyle to these other people. And if you say you're true Christians, you should stand on that. Don't glorify it. Open people's eyes to what it was, but open people's eyes to the good part of the Italian American community. Because we've worked so hard and given so much to American culture that we all know of today.